Welcome everyone. My name is Anette Arild and I'm a medical doctor and a PhD candidate working at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, NTNU in Trondheim, Norway. Today we'll be discussing cognitive impairment screening tools. As we age, it is common to experience some cognitive decline, which can affect our daily lives. Therefore, it's essential to have a quick and reliable method to identify cognitive impairment in its early stages. Cognitive impairment screening tools can help us evaluate cognitive functions and identify possible cognitive deficits. In this lecture, we will explore some of the most used cognitive screening tools and how they can assist healthcare professionals in detecting cognitive decline. So let's get started. Pause the video and spend a minute reading the case study report. Let's consider a scenario where you are a trained clinical psychologist that seeks to understand cognitive disorders in the context of neurological aging. Mr. Sato, in this example, and his wife have come to you seeking your opinion. Mrs. Sato is worried that her husband may have dementia, but Mr. Sato disagrees and attributes his forgetfulness to aging. As a psychologist, your role involves evaluating Mr. Sato's cognitive abilities and distinguishing between normal aging and pathological aging. To do this, it's essential to have a basic understanding of the aging process and its effects on cognitive abilities. Aging is an inevitable process that affects all organisms, characterized by physiological, psychological, and social changes over time. As we age, our brain undergoes morphological changes, which have been discussed in other videos of this online course. As our brain changes, so does our cognition. Some cognitive abilities, such as processing speed, start declining from our 30s, while others, such as language, remain relatively stable or even improve throughout most of our adult life. But while some cognitive decline is a normal part of aging, significant changes that interfere with daily activities may indicate underlying pathological processes. Pathological aging can include a range of conditions, including neurodegenerative disease such as dementia. Dementia is a complex syndrome characterized by significant decline of cognitive abilities that interferes with daily life or work. While there are many underlying causes of dementia, the most common cause is Alzheimer's disease, accounting for approximately 65% of dementia cases. Other types of dementia include vascular dementia, Lewy body dementia, frontotemporal dementia, mixed dementia, and more. Memory loss is a hallmark feature of dementia, along with deterioration in higher cognitive functions such as reasoning, visuospatial ability, and language. It is important to note that symptoms of delirium and depression can sometimes be mistaken for signs of dementia, but these conditions have different causes and treatment approaches. Delirium is typically caused by an underlying medical issue or medication side effects, while depression can affect memory and cognitive function, but often responds well to treatment. As a psychologist, you're well aware of the increasing prevalence of dementia with age, as reported by the World Health Organization. It is estimated that over 6 million Americans and nearly 60 million people worldwide are affected by Alzheimer's disease, making neurodegenerative disorders a significant societal challenge, especially with our aging population. You share Mrs. Sato's concern and decide to investigate the further. Now, how would you as a clinician proceed to make a diagnosis? Diagnosing dementia requires meeting several criteria, for example, those outlined in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorder, 5th edition, also called DSM-5, which is the most widely used classification system in the United States. The DSM criteria for major neurocognitive disorder, commonly known as dementia in older adults, includes standardized neuropsychological testing along with other clinical evaluations. If you're interested, you can pause the video and read the criteria before you continue. To determine Mr. Sato's cognitive abilities accurately, we will conduct a neuropsychological screening test. Neuropsychological screening tests are brief assessments used to identify possible cognitive impairments in older adults and to differentiate between age-related cognitive decline and dementia. Several cognitive screening tools have been developed, with the most used ones being the Mini-Mental Status Examination, or MMSE, Montreal Cognitive Assessment, MoCA test, and the clock drawing test. These tests can be done by anyone with training, for example, a general practitioner. They are widely used in both clinical and research settings. It is performed one-to-one, no next of kin is allowed in the room, no hints are allowed, and there is usually a standardized instruction to follow. While these tools offer a quick and convenient way to identify potential cognitive impairments, it is important to note that the information gathered using only these tools is not comprehensive enough for a definitive diagnosis. So, let's talk about MMSE, which is a widely used cognitive test questionnaire. It was first published in 1975 by Folstein and colleagues and has previously been referred to as the Folstein test. The test has a top score of 30, where anything above 27 is considered in the normal range, and results below 25 is suggestive of dementia. But this will depend a lot on the individual circumstances that I will come back to later. After a dementia diagnosis, the test is usually performed at fitting intervals to monitor the patient's cognition as the illness progresses. A person with Alzheimer's will on average decline about 2 points per year. Some of the benefits of this test is that it only takes about 10 minutes to complete and does not require any additional equipment. Now let's take a brief look at the questionnaire. In this presentation, I'll be using a previous version of the mini mental state exam. Although more recent versions of MMSE may contain additional instructions for examiners to follow, the core test remains the same. Today we will use this older version for educational purposes. The MMSE assesses 6 different cognitive abilities: orientation, short-term memory, attention and calculation, long-term memory, language, and visuospatial ability. The first ability, orientation. This part consists of 10 questions examining the patient's ability to know when and where he or she is at the moment of the test. For example, this involves asking the patient to recall the current day or which floor they are on. 1 point is given to each correct answer. Let's move on to short-term memory. The examiner tells the patient 3 words that they have to try to remember and immediately say afterwards. Let's see if you can do it. So, chair, squirrel, train. After that, the patient is informed that these words have to be remembered as they will be asked again later in the test. 1 point is given for each remembered word. The next task focuses on attention and calculation. The examiner picks a number and asks the patient to subtract 7 from the initial number and tell the new number. For example, if you have 80, what is 80 minus 7? 73. This continues for 4 more times. Each correct answer gives 1 point. Writing down is not allowed. It is important that this task takes a bit of time as it affects the result of the next task, so the distraction task is sometimes used where the patient is asked to count backwards from 100. Because now we are back to long-term memory and the 3 words that you were supposed to remember, which was chair, squirrel, train. Each word is now scored 1 point. The next 5 tasks focus on language. First, the examiner asks what's the name of this and points to an object or an image of an object. This is done 2 times. Then the patient has to repeat the sentence, no ifs, ands, or buts. Then there is a task with 3 commands, and the patient has to wait for all commands to be given before doing the task. Take a paper in your hand, fold it in half, and put it on the floor. Then the patient is shown a written instruction and told to do it. Close your eyes is written on the paper. In the last language task, the patient has to write a meaningful sentence, so a single word does not count. The last task is visuospatial ability, so the identification of a stimulus and its location, is tested by making the patient copy the figure in the questionnaire. There is an example of how it could look like if it was done by someone with visuospatial impairment, for example by someone with dementia. So let's move over to the MoCA test, which is another commonly used screening tool. It was developed by a team of researchers in Montreal in 1996 and has since become widely used in clinical and research settings as an alternative to MMSE that is more sensitive in detecting cognitive impairment. It's a bit longer than MMSE, taking about 10 to 15 minutes to complete. The maximum achievable score is 30. Typically, a score of 26 or higher is considered normal. Scores lower than 26 may indicate cognitive impairment. MoCA evaluates similar cognitive domains as MMSE, and I will now show you all of the tasks used in the MoCA test. Visuospatial abilities are assessed using a clock drawing task and a three-dimensional cube copy. Executive functions are assessed using a trail-making task. A three-item naming task with low familiarity animals, in the original version, lion, rhinoceros, and camel, is used to assess language together with two additional tasks. A repetition of two complex sentences and a fluency task where participants must name as many words beginning with a specific letter as possible. Short-term memory is assessed with two learning trials of a list of 5 words that the subject must repeat. Long-term memory is assessed with a delayed recall task of the same list of words that must be recalled after approximately 5 minutes. Attention, together with working memory, are evaluated using digit span forward and backward tasks, a sustained attention task, and a serial subtraction task. In the abstraction task, participants must name a similarity between two objects. For example, here you have a banana and orange, which are both fruits. Finally, in orientation task, participants must answer questions about current date, day of the week, and place where the testing is administered. By now, you know that MoCA is a neurocognitive tool comprising a set of tests assessing several domains of cognitive functioning. As mentioned, MoCA includes the clock drawing test. But the clock drawing test is often administered in combination with the minimal mental status examination as an alternative to MoCA. In the clock test, the patient is instructed to draw a clock, put in all its digits, and set the hands for 10 after 11. On its own, the clock drawing test is a simple and effective neurocognitive screening tool for monitoring the deterioration of visuospatial executive functioning. Patients with dementia of Alzheimer's type can present deficits in visuospatial executive function during the initial stages of the disease. Now I'm going to show you some example images of the clock drawing test and how you look at different stages of Alzheimer's disease progression. The image in the upper right corner exemplifies an individual with no obvious signs of disease. This image exemplifies a patient at the initial stages of the disease. And here's an example of an image from a patient with severe dementia. If you're curious to see an example of how a patient with dementia performs on the test, you can copy the link provided in the supplementary material. The aforementioned tests are only some of the tools in your toolbox. Different circumstances call for different tests, and there's plenty of them. Here are some more examples. Feel free to pause the video and look them up if you're interested. It is important to remember that while screening tools are very useful, there's a lot of things we need to keep in mind in order to use them as intended. For example, the tests I told you about today are not intended to provide a definitive diagnosis of dementia, but rather to identify individuals who may benefit from further evaluation. A comprehensive diagnostic evaluation typically includes a thorough medical history, physical examination, and MR imaging, information from their caretaker or next of kin, as well as detailed cognitive assessment. When scoring the test, the circumstances is important to think about. Did the patient use particularly long time on each task? Were there many corrections by the patient? Were they motivated? Do they get test anxiety? Had a bad day? In any pain or have other somatic problems? Do they get tired easily? Did they have access to hearing aid and/or glasses? The test is also influenced by the patient's age, education, language function, and culture. Also, with its short durations, there are of course some domains that is not thoroughly investigated. Take a moment to read about what happened further to Mr. Sato. It is likely that his score would fall at the lower end of both MMSE and MoCA. Mr. Sato was not able to recall the names of 4 objects after a 5-minute interval, nor was he able to do simple calculation, copy a simple drawing, or remember fundamental facts of his life. On the clock drawing test, one can imagine that Mr. Sato wouldn't be able to put the digits in their correct positions. The case of Mrs. Sato presented in this presentation is fictional and has been adapted from the casebook for DSM-4. Here's a list of references for further reading on the topic of cognitive impairment screening tools and dementia. We hope that this presentation has been informative and helpful for you. As a quick summary, we covered the basics of age-related cognitive decline and neurocognitive tests, including the mini-mental status exam and the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. We also want to thank our team members for their contributions to this presentation. Thank you again for your time and attention.